Well, it was difficult, especially moving into Graceland. He already had his inner circle, and of course they embraced me, but I never realized that that was it. I mean, he didn't really go out. He didn't go out. He didn't really like eating in restaurants, asking them not to, take photographs. So we had our. I mean, truly lived in a bubble.
Did you ever think that you were missing out on something?
Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, reigned over the American music scene in the 1950s and 60s. With his signature hip-swiveling moves and smooth vocals. But behind the legendary music and iconic style, a twisted mind lurked. In the decades since Elvis's passing, his ex-wife Priscilla Presley has been repeatedly asked about the man she was married to. A legend, but also a man harboring monstrous secrets. Priscilla first met Elvis in 1959, when her stepfather was stationed in Germany and Elvis was serving in the army. A friend introduced them at a local hangout, and they later connected at Elvis's home, shared with his father Vernon. Though they kept in touch by phone and letter, Elvis soon left Germany to resume his music career, and Priscilla returned to her life as a 14-year-old high school student. Eventually, Elvis asked Priscilla's family if she could live with him in Memphis, promising she could finish high school while staying at his home. Priscilla claimed in her book Elvis and Me that they didn't become intimate until after their 1967 wedding, despite living together for years. Decades after Elvis's death, Priscilla remains loyal to his legacy. However, in interviews with the right people, she's been frank about their marriage. Priscilla admitted to the Sunday News in 2018 that Elvis habitually cheated on her, which ended their marriage. He wasn't faithful. I tried to turn my back on that, but I just didn't want to share him. He wanted to be married and have a family. I don't know if he was ever cut out to be married because I don't think he could ever be faithful to one woman. Elvis's controlling behavior extended beyond infidelity. Priscilla said he dictated her fashion choices and even expressions, slapping her forehead and warning her not to furrow her brow to avoid wrinkles. Priscilla also revealed to The Guardian in 2015 that Elvis would pull out guns when angry. It's funny now, but scary at first, very scary. There was no warning. Maybe he was in a bad mood that day, or maybe he would just see someone he didn't particularly care for, so he'd just pick up the gun. In her 1986 memoir, Elvis and Me, Priscilla revealed a disturbing incident where Elvis forced himself on her while saying, "This is how a real man makes love to a woman." When asked about it in 2015, Priscilla said, "Elvis and I had a truly loving relationship," while standing by what was written in the book. Priscilla wasn't the only underage girl Elvis pursued. From his early 20s on, he conducted secret liaisons with baby-faced teenagers. One of the first was 14-year-old little Frances Forbes, who dated the 22-year-old Elvis after he spotted her lingering by Graceland's famous iron gates. A romance blossomed, with Frances often spending the night at Graceland, sometimes partying, sometimes just the two of them. My mother called Graceland several times about me being home in time for school. Elvis would get on the phone and soothe her feathers when he said, "I'll have her home in time," Frances said. As Elvis grew older, his taste for teenage girls didn't fade. In 1960, the 25-year-old asked to meet 14-year-old Sandy Farrah after seeing her in a photo at her father's nightclub. Initially, Sandy's mother only allowed her to date Elvis chaperoned, but by their fourth date, she was allowed to see him alone. A relationship developed, but Sandy's mother objected when Elvis asked her to move in with him at Graceland, and their romance fizzled. This was shortly before Priscilla moved in. Approaching 40, Elvis's penchant for teenage girls remained. Raquel Welch was 14 when she met Elvis, 39, in 1974. Elvis, who'd picked Raquel up in a white Cadillac while she was hanging out with his stepbrothers, enchanted the teenager and took her on an expensive shopping trip. Despite their 25-year age gap, a mutual fascination developed. Raquel said Elvis told her that being with someone her age took him back to his younger years, made him feel more comfortable. Raquel is adamant only kissing occurred with Elvis, but it's clear the legend was aware of the legal ramifications of involvement with underage girls. Elvis was a manipulator with controlling tendencies and a capacity for violence. He met pageant queen Ginger Alden when she was 20, and he was 41. Though he hoped to make her his wife, their relationship was problematic. After one argument, he allegedly had an aide slash her tires so she couldn't leave his home. On another occasion, when she drove away after a fight, it's claimed he fired a gunshot. The couple were engaged but never made it down the aisle due to their tumultuous relationship. It wasn't just Ginger who faced severe manipulation. Numerous reports claim Elvis would drug Priscilla, spiking her with amphetamines to keep her awake during marathon sessions, fueled by substances he'd become addicted to in the Army. During these drugged-up marathons, Elvis also took Polaroids of Priscilla, storing them in a silver suitcase delivered to her after his death. Even in the early days of his career, Elvis's hips had a mind of their own, and the ladies loved him for it. As soon as the instrumental section kicked in, he'd step back from the microphone, losing himself in the music and shaking his entire body. The crowd went nuts. These dance moves were all natural, but as soon as he realized they were a hit, he began to milk it for all it's worth. However, not everyone loved these spicy gyrations. Though Elvis was a hit with the ladies, young men treated him brutally, with many teen boys despising him and actively trying to harm him at shows, forcing the singer to hire a guard for certain public appearances. As one of his managers said, "It was almost frightening. Somebody'd always try to take a crack at him." Elvis's scandalous 1953 show in La Crosse, Wisconsin earned him a terrifying enemy, the FBI. After his performance, the local Catholic diocese sent an emergency message to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, warning that Presley was a definite danger to the security of the United States because he could arouse the sexual passions of teenage youth. Gay entrapment was one of the FBI's favorite tricks at the time to provide sufficient blackmail material to keep celebrities and politicians in line. An actual extortion attempt was made by Lawrence Johannes Dr. Landau, a fake doctor from South Africa, who was treating Presley while he was serving in the army in Germany. Landau made advances on Elvis, and when they were rejected, he was fired. He threatened to ruin Elvis's career and expose compromising photos of him. If there was no smoke without fire, surely Elvis would have wanted to drag this fake blackmailer into court. Speculation wasn't just rife among the authorities, but also among people who were frequently in the star's unguarded company. Gerald Peters, Presley's chauffeur and close friend, described him as a man's man who, although he loved Priscilla dearly, preferred the company of men. He notoriously had an inner circle of male hangers-on, bodyguards, and staff known as the Memphis Mafia. Although there were some stories of homoerotic horseplay, it was little more than you'd see in your average GAA dressing room or stag party hotel suite. There was a notable exception, however, that went beyond male bonding. Actor Nick Adams was undoubtedly Presley's best friend. Adams had previously lived with and had an affair with bisexual actor and teen icon James Dean. Elvis and Nick met after Dean's death, just as Presley's star was starting to rise. The two became inseparable, and the calming effect Adams had on Presley led his notoriously temperamental manager, Colonel Tom Parker, to encourage the friendship. Substances and copious amounts of alcohol were a large component in the pair's socializing, as they both struggled with the vagaries of fame. Although Elvis's superstardom greatly eclipsed Adams's comparatively humble acting career, according to Elvis biographer Kathleen Tracy, the King would often ask Adams to stay over on nights when he felt particularly lonely or agitated. This closeness, coupled with their mutual need for escapism, fueled rumors that their relationship might have been more than just platonic. Additionally, Elvis Presley was described as being churned up inside during a difficult period of his life by Marlon Brando, the iconic Hollywood actor. Brando, who had his own tumultuous experiences with fame, had a close connection with Elvis Presley throughout the years. Both men, despite their public personas, harbored deep insecurities and sought solace in each other's company. They also shared a very personal and secret connection with a woman named Carmen Montes. Throughout their lives, Montes was a pen pal and agony aunt to both Elvis, Brando, and some other Hollywood stars. According to a book by author Gary Lindbergh titled Brando on Elvis in his own words, one of Brando's letters to Montes detailed his worry for Elvis. In February 1969, Brando wrote to Montes that it looked like Elvis really didn't feel like talking to anyone. This letter came after claims that Elvis had been savagely attacked by unknown assailants, suspected gang members who attempted to kidnap him. He said, "I know he's there, shut up in the house, and I know he got the note I left him, but he hasn't responded. I didn't think Priscilla would get to him this time. I mean, get under his skin, especially if she made him so mad in Memphis." Brando went on to criticize Elvis's wife at the time, Priscilla Presley, for not supporting her husband during his hardship. In the letter, Brando alluded to Priscilla and Elvis arguing in recent months. He noted how she could have been the one to help him get over his trauma from the past. Brando added, "He's just begun to find himself as a man and a patient. Understanding wife could have done wonders." The actor suggested Elvis could have instead found solace in another woman. While he had cheated on his wife in the past, most notably with actress Anne Margaret, Brando mused that the star didn't have it in him anymore. "Now Elvis," he wrote, "partly out of morality and partly out of fear, won't turn to another woman, and he seems to fear other men." Finally, he added that he believed Elvis was doubting his own sexuality. Brando wrote, "He's being churned up inside until he fears himself. I sometimes think he fears that he's a latent homosexual." While some people have questioned the validity of these handwritten letters, publisher Cumed Editions claims they have proof the articles are genuine. The Godfather actor knew all about experimenting intimately with other men. Author William J. Mann wrote of Brando's life in the biography, The Contender. Within this tome, he revealed that Brando had many relationships with men, as well as women throughout his life. "When I awake in the morning," Mann wrote of Brando, "the first thing he thought about was, who am I going to fuck with today?" Even if there was a woman sleeping beside him. Beyond his reputation as a charmer who captivated both the ladies and the gents, Presley had cultivated a connection with substance abuse, a battle recalled in harrowing detail by his ex-partner Linda Thompson in her 2016 autobiography, A Little Thing Called Life, Unloving Elvis Presley, Bruce Jenner, and Songs in Between. Linda was just 22 years old when she met Elvis, who was 15 years her senior and a longtime object of her affection. They dated for 4.5 years, from 1972 to 1976, back when she was a beauty pageant winner and recently crowned Miss Tennessee. Linda and Elvis split in November 1976, less than a year before his death the following August. During their time together, Linda saved Elvis's life more than once, while trying to save him from the substance addiction that had taken hold of him. She explained that little was known about prescription medication at the time, and said that Elvis truly believed he could not be harmed by taking the substances. While they had split, Linda was hopeful that she'd one day reunite with Elvis, but her hopes were dashed by his sudden and tragic death, which sent shockwaves around the world. Their chance meeting one night when she was invited to a private screening he was hosting at a movie theater was love at first sight. After that, they became inseparable. During their first trip away together, when Elvis whisked her off to Las Vegas, Linda noticed several guns lying on his side of the bed, as well as an assortment of at least a dozen prescription medicine bottles. She asked Elvis if he had been sick, and when he said he wasn't, she asked why he had so many prescription drugs. Linda recalled, "He looked around, so used to seeing the bottles, he apparently didn't even notice them anymore. He had to stare at them for a moment before he formulated an answer. He told her he had a little respiratory thing, but that he was fine now." She said she believed him because, at that point, She had no reason to, but she soon learned the truth about Elvis's addiction. "I didn't even know that people abused prescription substances," she penned, and so, of course, I didn't doubt his explanation. Elvis was practically nocturnal and would take sleeping pills every single day to help him rest during the daylight hours. Linda said he would also take tanning pills, which increased the melanin in his skin and helped him get a more sun-kissed look. One of the most startling details in Linda's book is what she says about Elvis's deal with a dentist. Linda accompanied Elvis to the dentist where he had a quick filling. Then, with a wink and a nod, the doctor left the room, she wrote. Elvis immediately opened the cabinet under the sink and took out a gigantic jar of pills. Without hesitation, he began taking handfuls of the pills and stuffing them into random pockets. Linda said it was clear this wasn't the first time he'd done this, and that although he acted like it was all totally natural, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. He explained to her that the dentist knew what he was doing and that it was just sleeping pills, which were tough to get prescriptions for. Linda said that having lived with him for more than a month, she knew he had to take sleeping pills to go to sleep and something else to wake him up, as well as oftentimes something to pep him up to go on stage. She said Elvis claimed that he'd been given pills during his time in the army to help keep him awake and on post overnight, and that he'd never been without pills since. She said he believed that prescription drugs were perfectly healthy and didn't see any reason to stop taking them or monitor his intake more carefully. Linda said Elvis didn't think of himself as an addict and that there was a stigma attached to substance addiction that the star would have been very embarrassed by. "Substance addiction is not pretty for anyone," she penned, "but when it came to Elvis, the pressure was on me to try to maintain a semblance of normalcy." Linda said that through remaining vigilant to prevent him from accidentally overdosing, she neglected taking care of herself and her own needs. She described one moment where she found Elvis drowning in a bowl of soup. They had been sitting up in bed eating when she went to the bathroom to wash her face. She hurried through her bedtime routine but came back to find Elvis face down in the bowl of chicken noodle soup. Whatever he had taken, besides his normal sleeping pill, had hit him hard and fast, she said. Linda shouted to wake Elvis up, but he was completely passed out and looked as if he was dead. She ran over to him, pulled him out of the bowl, and began clearing the food from his throat. When he remained unconscious, Linda gave Elvis a shot of Rolaids that had been left by doctors for such an occasion and called medics for help. Doctors told her he would be fine, but she kept a restless vigil by his side. When he finally woke up, he told her he had a dream he was dying. In any case, while Elvis's substance use, a trait he shared with many famous performers of the era, including Johnny Cash and fellow Dr. Nicopolis patient Jerry Lee Lewis, is common knowledge today, at the time of his death, Elvis's family and his team had largely managed to keep the more sordid details of his life private. Immediately following the singer's passing, his family requested a private autopsy to determine the cause of death. Tennessee's chief medical examiner, Jerry Francisco, released the star's official death certificate a few days later, listing the cause as a coronary issue unrelated to substances. Elvis Presley died of heart disease, and prescription drugs found in his blood were not a contributing factor, Francisco told American Medical News at the time. Had these substances not been there, he still would have died. Several of the other pathologists involved in the autopsy would go on to criticize Francisco's tactics, claiming he was apparently favoring the family's privacy with his announcement and conclusion. Multiple doctors involved reportedly argued that the musician's cause of death should have been attributed to a toxic combination of pharmaceuticals. With the autopsy request coming directly from the family rather than at the state's behest, the full findings were sealed after the procedure. Multiple attempts were made over the years to get the documents unsealed, but each was met with resistance. Elvis Presley, known worldwide as the King of Rock and Roll, lived a life that was as grand as it was tragic. His fame was unparalleled, his influence immeasurable, and his music timeless. Yet, beneath the layers of his public persona, the confident crooner, the charismatic performer, and the cultural icon, lay a man deeply troubled by personal demons. While the public adored him and the media captured his every move, very few understood the true extent of his struggles. It wasn't until nearly 2 years after his untimely death in 1977 that the possibility of substance abuse as a contributing factor to his demise began to be seriously examined and reported. This revelation marked a turning point in how the world understood not just the circumstances surrounding his death, but the reality of the life he led. Elvis Presley's life was marked by immense highs and equally devastating lows. Rising from humble beginnings in Tupelo, Mississippi, Elvis catapulted to global superstardom in the 1950s, with his unique blend of rhythm and blues, country and gospel music. His groundbreaking sound, paired with his provocative performance style, captured the hearts of millions and made him a cultural phenomenon. However, the fame that brought him to the pinnacle of success also carried a heavy burden. By the 1960s, the pressures of maintaining his superstar status began to take their toll on Elvis. The relentless pace of his career, the constant scrutiny by the public and media, and the expectations placed on him as the king of rock and roll became increasingly overwhelming. The persona that Elvis had created, the larger-than-life rock star, became a prison from which he could not escape. Behind the glitz and glamour, Elvis struggled with feelings of isolation, insecurity, and the weight of living up to his own legend. It was during this period that Elvis began to rely heavily on prescription medications to cope with the physical and mental demands of his career. Initially, these drugs were prescribed to help him manage the grueling schedule of recording sessions, film shoots, and live performances. However, over time, his use of these substances escalated from occasional use to dependence and ultimately addiction. The medications, which included a cocktail of amphetamines, barbiturates, and painkillers, provided temporary relief, but at a devastating cost. Elvis's substance abuse was exacerbated by the culture of the time, which often glamorized or minimized the dangers of drug use, especially within the entertainment industry. Additionally, Elvis was surrounded by an entourage that was more interested in maintaining the status quo than in addressing his deteriorating health. Many of those closest to him, including his manager Colonel Tom Parker, were either unaware of the severity of his addiction or chose to turn a blind eye, prioritizing the continuation of his career over his well-being. The 1970s saw Elvis's physical and mental health decline rapidly. His once fit and energetic physique gave way to significant weight gain, and his stage performances, once electrifying, began to suffer. Friends and fans alike noticed the changes, but few understood the depth of the problem. Publicly, Elvis continued to project the image of the king, but privately, he was trapped in a vicious cycle of addiction, loneliness, and despair. The extent of Elvis's drug use and its impact on his health remained largely hidden from the public until after his death. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of his Graceland mansion in Memphis, Tennessee. The official cause of death was listed as a heart attack, but toxicology reports later revealed that he had multiple drugs in his system at the time of his death. It was a tragic and ignominious end for the man who had once been the epitome of youth, vitality, and rebellion. The initial reports of Elvis's death focused on the heart attack, with little mention of his drug use. However, as more information came to light in the following months and years, the narrative began to shift. The media, which had previously celebrated his every move, now delved into the darker aspects of his life. Reports of his substance abuse, his deteriorating health, and his increasingly erratic behavior in the final years of his life became subjects of intense scrutiny. The revelation of Elvis's drug use shocked the world and cast a new light on his life and legacy. Fans who had idolized him were forced to confront the reality that their hero had been deeply troubled, and that his death while tragic, was perhaps preventable. The story of Elvis Presley became not just a tale of success and fame, but also a cautionary story of the perils of celebrity, the pressures of maintaining a public image, and the dangers of addiction. In the years since his death, Elvis Presley's struggles with substance abuse have become a significant part of his legacy. His story has been used to raise awareness about the dangers of addiction and the importance of mental health care, especially for those in the public eye. Elvis's life, once seen as a fairy tale of rags to riches success, is now also understood as a story of a man who was, in many ways, a victim of his own success. A man who had everything but could not escape the inner turmoil that ultimately led to his downfall. Today, Elvis Presley is remembered not just as the king of rock and roll, but as a symbol of the complex interplay between fame, addiction, and personal tragedy. His music continues to inspire and entertain, but his life story serves as a reminder of the human cost of stardom. The image of Elvis that endures is one of immense talent and charisma, but also of vulnerability and pain. A man who gave the world so much, yet struggled to find peace within himself. His legacy is both a celebration of his extraordinary contributions to music and a poignant reflection on the personal challenges that ultimately defined his life.